It says it looks like we're ready to go live. So, welcome everyone to another WineShark Wednesday. It is I, your host, the WineShark. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you with your patience for being gone last week. We are back from our California tour, and it was amazing. Absolutely as expected, with all kinds of fun visits with a lot of fun winemakers. I want to say a big, huge thank you to all of my guests who committed to going with me and going out to explore Lodi and Napa and Sonoma and Lake County, and for making this possible. It was just such an amazing trip. I cannot, my head is just still swimming with all the cool things that we did. The interesting experiences from big wineries to small wineries to everywhere in between, and just such a wonderful season and amazing trip. So I can't wait to do it again. Hope most of you, we're going to be talking more of those shows and how you too can join us at some of these exciting destinations and see the inside scoop on kind of California winemaking, especially as it applies to the northern part of the world. So anyway, I hope you guys are doing great, and we're going to welcome back. After that, so things that are coming up here in the near future, though, the holiday season is well underway now. You know, we finished up with all of our Halloween things and our Halloween theme, but of course, Thanksgiving's right around the corner, followed by Christmas, followed by any other holidays that many of you celebrate. So it's definitely the season of celebration, and we're going to be talking more and more about wines for celebratory purposes. Speaking of which, Beaujolais Nouveau Day is coming up, so that's always kind of fun. But I wanted to touch on a couple of things. Also, we're going to be doing the fall special. Actually, not our fall special, sorry, the Thanksgiving special, specifically targeting wines around that particular holiday here in America. And wonderful wines to go with all of your various traditional and sometimes non-traditional foods. We'll talk about pairing methods, etc., down at Reunion Tower on the 21st. That's a Sunday night show. Wonderful little 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. show, so you can be in home, back in bed before you have to get up and go to work the next morning. So today's topic was inspired by our visits out in California. One of the topics that we ended up asking or I ended up answering a lot of questions about, and we got to see firsthand, was what we call vine stress. So what, you may ask, is vine stress? Well, vine stress is basically the outward symptoms of the grapevine trying its best to produce good quality fruit, right? To kind of understand this, you got to think like a plant for a minute. And that means think about the plant cycle and how plants reproduce and what it is that they're doing, right? Fruit-bearing plants are obviously bearing seeds that are wrapped in fruit, which is energy for that seed to then go on and become a new copy of the parent fruit. Well, and this works with vegetables and other things, but we're using our examples of berries in particular when we talk about grapes. So when grapes do this, they're trying to produce that basically that sugar-rich content around a seed. Now, various climatic conditions, etc., will determine how well that actually works and how well it's going within a given year. The idea of good and bad growing years is kind of what influences this whole topic in the first place. So when we talk about things like vine stress, we're speaking about how the vine shows how well it's doing on that particular growing year. Now, having vines struggle a little there's a kind of a common thing, whether that's a good or a bad thing. It's a very often brought up question. You'll often hear that stress is always good, but like all things, stress is right in the appropriate amounts. Things that can cause stress are things like I said, climate. So if we're talking about whether they're getting a lot of rain or a little rain, whether they're getting a lot of sun or a little sun, whether they're getting harsh weather or gentle weather. Basically, all those factors that go into the usual growing season, plus the age of the vine itself and how long it's been producing, can cause various levels of stress. In other words, as wine gets older, it's easier to stress it out. Now, stress's effect on the grape is kind of counterintuitive. One would think that with bad weather, bad performance, that they would produce therefore bad fruit, but the reverse is actually true. When the plant senses that it is having difficulty, it puts a lot of energy into fewer fruit-bearing clusters. Okay, so in other words, it tries to make sure that it gets viable seed product that can go out and make more fruit. Make more plants. and therefore it puts a lot of energy and it concentrates the energy. Whereas if in a very bumper year, a bumper crop year, so to speak, you'd have lots of fruit, but not necessarily as high quality. In other words, it's volume over quality, quantity over quality on the nice years. So what does that mean for us as wine drinkers? Well, when vineyard managers and viticulturists are out there trying to make the vines produce the best quality wine, you don't necessarily want a lot of weak fruit. We want good, dense concentration of fruit. In fact, we go so far in viticultural practice as to remove fruit from the vines in order to help it focus all of its energy into a few clusters per vine. So, in combination with viticulture and vineyard management, a good degree of stress, i.e., when the grape has to work to make its fruit possible, is when we get that perfect combination of concentration of fruit, of caloric effort, and concentration of flavors that all kind of combine into that perfect spot. Okay, so it's like all things in wine. It's not a matter of A or B. It's a matter of getting it just right. Different varietals, different regions, different vineyards, and different plants will all have different needs. So this isn't a simple one or all kind of thing. Just remember that it's not always good or always bad. It needs to be just right. Something we saw a lot of, and I'm going to share some pictures with you here, that we saw a lot of out on this trip just recently. We were there basically a couple weeks after the harvest had completed. Now, the harvest can take anywhere from 2.5 to 3 months, depending on the year. You have a ripeness factor that you're dealing with that goes somewhere from mid-August all the way through mid-October. Okay, so it's a long time coming, but we were there right at the end of all this whole process. But before, the vines had been pruned back, so all of their foliage from the whole summer and fall and harvest season were still up on the grapes. So I'm going to show you guys some examples here. Oops, that's our label for later. Some examples of what we saw. So this is Clinker Brick. This is their vineyards out in Lodi. And notice that you get these beautiful fall colors. You've got some grape leaves that have this nice yellow, bright red, dark crimson kind of look about them. And this is the vine actually showing how it is stressed. That's the visual presentation of vine stress. Okay. This is a close-up of one where you see it kind of going through the process. You're seeing it start to kind of wilt away. This isn't quite the same as the natural process that we see of the turning of fall leaves. Okay, they don't work that way. Instead, they will dry out and naturally fall off during the winter. And that, although when we're making them for wine, we cut them back purposefully, but they don't just simply turn brown or turn red to brown like we would in, say, oak leaves and maple leaves and things like that. But this is a great shot of the work in progress. Same vineyard. Now this is a picture of their vines kind of looking out over here. This is at Ridge Lytton Springs. So these vines are a perfect example of stressed older vines. Notice how thick the trunks are on these vines. This is a mixed varietal field, what's called a field blend. And we've talked about that with blending in the past. But there's a lot of different grape types out there. But you'll notice that kind of consistent, inconsistent thing where because of the thickness of that trunk, the age of these grapes, they're definitely showing their stress out there as well. Okay, this is a close-up of one of their grapes that they have right near the greeting area. They've actually let this vine that is right in the foreground grow up and actually wrap itself around the tree, reminding you that yes, grapes are indeed vines and they will climb if given the opportunity. Hence the idea of trellising and training vines, etc. But I thought this was a really interesting shot because this old vine just kind of creeping up and joining with this tree nearby. Plus the trunk in the bottom left corner there, you can see that just delightfully old, 100-year-old plus vine and how thick and burly it is. Now these vines, as they get older, actually I think I got one more shot. No, that's back to the other way. So as these vines, as they get older, start to produce less fruit, but it becomes more concentrated and nuanced. To talk about vine age, broadly speaking, vines once from planting, they start producing grapes about 2 to 3 years, kind of hit their running peak at about 5-ish. And they can last and kind of plateau out to about 15 to 25-year-olds, depending on the varietal of grape. After that, production slowly starts to decline as the vine gets older. It's getting bigger and older, but it's not producing as much fruit. Now, many commercial wineries don't last, their grapes don't last much past that point. Remember, it is an agricultural product, and the amount of grapes you can pull out of a given vineyard acreage is an important factor in making your winery and your vines productive. So old vines, as we've talked about in a couple, probably about a year ago, I think now, old vines, though, don't have a technical classification, but anything after 25 is kind of considered old. I don't think that's some sort of millennial thing, but just it's the fact of how wine grapes grow up. What I would think in the more traditional sense of people who advertise as old vines, we're talking about wines that usually have average vine ages up over the 60-year mark, sometimes up to 100. The Lytton Springs example there that I just showed you, I think the average vine age there is averaging at something like 108 years old. It's an amazingly old vineyard. And obviously limited production, but amazing concentrated flavor because of it. So remember when you start to kind of see these things and start thinking about it, this is not to be focused particularly on old vines, but stress in vines and stress in grapes. If you ever hear that word or see that kind of look to the grapes, it's actually things going the right way. It means that vineyard is being tended to, it's being pushed to its limits. Think about any other thing that you're trying to get the it doesn't take nurturing with grapes. Grapes need to be pushed rather than coddled and pampered. They need to be kind of worked hard to get the best thing out of them. So fascinating little topic, some great visual examples. I'll be sharing more things that came up from the tour as we go through WineShark Wednesdays throughout the rest of the month. We're going to be talking about just kind of not only how you can join us, what we did, and just some of the fun things that we learned from some of the winemakers and locals, and just the wonderful experience that we had when we visited. Okay, so let's talk about today's grocery store grab. So the grocery store grab, for those of you that are not familiar, is our process of selecting wines from the grocery store rather than big box or specialty retailers. Some of us don't have access to those types of places to shop, or out of convenience, you shop at the grocery store, where unfortunately, there's usually not a lot of professional wine expertise available. So we need to learn to rely on labeling of wine. Now, this is a case where we are looking at a wine that is actually purchased. It was at a big box store. It's something I happen to have. I wanted to feature this today because it was from Sonoma, where the pictures from the grapes that I just showed you were from. Something I happen to have on hand, and Olema is a fun little brand that is actually affiliated with Total Wine. So this is kind of not really the grocery store grab, but we're still going to practice our label focusing. We want to know what's in the bottle. We want to know where it was made. We want to know flavor words that help us understand what is going on in the bottle. If you're not experienced with wine and don't know how different regions affect the grape taste, or even the difference between different varieties of grapes, you might need a little bit of help on the back of the bottle. So we're looking for simple, human-friendly wine labeling. So this is a case where this is Olema. This is actually the version that I have is the 2019, not 2018, but is the Sonoma County Chardonnay. Okay, so this kind of on the front, it's giving us the first information we need. Who makes it? Olema. Where is it from? Sonoma County. What's the grape? Chardonnay. This is what we almost always see on a good wine label in the front. Now, this is the non-artistic all version. We're not talking about brand marketing slash, that whole sort of identity marketing thing. So this is very practical, very simplistic label. Nothing special really going on there, right? It's got their kind of gold O. Now I've had both the I've had the Reserve and this version of this wine, and this is their basic version. This one comes in, I believe, right around $14. So this is kind of in that middle range, and when it comes to price. Where we want to aim for quality versus quantity. So on the back of the label, however, here's what we've got going on. This is where where the rubber meets the road, and where we want to see the wine tell us a little bit about itself, so that we know that it's the right choice for whatever it is we're doing. So Olema Chardonnay, made by Amici Cellars, is a blend of our best grapes from Sonoma County. This wine pairs exceptionally well with grilled fish, poultry, and light pasta dishes. Olema, which means coyote in Miwok, honors Sonoma County and the Miwok Native Americans who call this land home. All right, so they're jumping straight to food pairings here, but aren't telling us much about the flavor of the wine. And I would also argue that the pairings that they've got, which I love them putting food pairings are a little bit challenging because they require a little bit more detail than simply saying something like grilled fish Well, what kind of fish? Are we talking about salmon? Are we talking about swordfish? Are we talking about tilapia? Are we talking about catfish? All of those can be grilled, and they're very different tastes. Same thing, poultry. Poultry covers a lot. That's literally the most generic term we can use for stuff with feathers when it started out of its life. And then light pasta dishes. Well, pasta is a medium, right? Pasta is basically, grain flour pounded in and moistened into beautiful noodles. Light, I'm assuming that means the type of sauce that you're putting on it, because pasta is just a medium like rice. So those are really kind of not, that's an example right there of, you didn't really do a good job of telling me much other than what I kind of maybe wanted to hear, right? You covered it with such a broad brush that it didn't really help us along our way. And no flavor words to back it up. See, if they had said something like, hey, I don't know, this is a medium to high bodied Chardonnay. The Sonoma County overall is a coastally influenced growing area, although the county has different subsections. So this is broadly speaking, kind of that coastal style. It's got a little hint of tropical fruit on the nose, but it's not big on fruit. It's a little cold right now, so I'm not getting a huge ton of aroma, but I'm getting a little bit of bruised apple or maybe golden pear. And the alcohol and oak aren't really coming off of it wildly strongly, but there's definitely a little hint of the oak in the very, very back of the nose, kind of hinting at what it might be when we're coming through here. Now, let's swirl around and give it a taste and see if we can come up with some better flavor words that maybe they could put on this label. Okay, so here we've got definitely a more fruit-forward style of Chardonnay. This is now it's got this canned peaches and a little hint of butter on the front, but not overly buttery. This is not a big malolactically fermented Chardonnay. It's not like that. The word butter is barely a hint. In fact, it's more of that warm feeling you get from a baked fruit in a pie, where butter happened to be present, but it's not dominant. The little hint of oak in there is really more of a structural element across the mid-back palate and not overly dominant. So this doesn't hit those two big feared things that most people don't like about Chardonnay. It's not overly buttery and it's not overly woody. It's got a very nice mid-palate of fruit there. And the alcohol kind of lingers around. It doesn't have much of an elegant finish. There's more of what I would call the process finish. That oak is lingering, and then there's a little bit of alcohol in the back of the tongue. Certainly not a bad Chardonnay, especially at that price point. This is an interesting one for people who are not particularly Chardonnay drinkers. For those of you that are big fans, this is an interesting style, but not a standout. It doesn't have a ton going on, a ton of complexity, in that mid-back palate. It doesn't really thrill me out. Now, is this one of those ones where you can definitely bring to a party at a low price point and it's going to do no harm? Sure. You're going to try and get people kind of to bridge over to Chardonnay. This is not a bad place to start. Simply because the fact that it avoids those two big problems of butter and oak. Doesn't have any of the minerality, structure, or complexity of a Chablis, but you got to start somewhere for $15. Yeah, the texture on it is also kind of medium. It's got mouth filling out the sides, but not the center of the tongue too strongly. It's got that, so I would still put its body at maybe medium plus versus a full-bodied white wine. There's definitely some out there that have more chewiness, more full mouth feel, and more viscosity to it. So, interesting selection. Certainly not bad. We usually try and answer 3 questions when we talk about our grocery store grab. Is it well executed? Yeah, there's no flaws here. This is a well-made wine. They're not cutting corners. I would be interested to see what their oak program is, whether they're doing staving or bagging rather than aging in actual oak barrels. As that usually tends to drive prices up. But there's certainly no flaws evident in the wine. Is it on style? Yeah, I would say this for a Northern California, a 21st century Chardonnay. When we started getting into the 1990s and the 2000s, where we had all these wildly buttery, wildly oaked wines, I really think the overall industry is moving away from that or creating a special subcategory. For instance, I'm seeing a lot of grocery store wines that very much target the word butter on their label, if not the word butter or butter and cream and butter cake and creamy this and buttery that. They're basically telling you, I'm this style. But without that, the default Chardonnays seem to be finally going away from that, which is nice. Kind of help define the style. And then last but not least, is it worth the price tag? Well, at $15 for this, yeah, sure. This is definitely in that wheelhouse. I would confidently recommend this if that's what you're looking to spend. I would certainly not put it in my top 10 of Chardonnays of all time, but certainly a solid entry. Now, I said earlier, I tried the reserve version of this. The reserve version for its $20 price point is definitely one. I don't put it, again, not quite top 10, but definitely a step up and a high recommend. That is one that at Total Wine you can definitely get and feel confident in as a very kind of a little bit more sophisticated Sonoma style Chardonnay with that nice tropical fruit forward, not a lot of butter and not a lot of wood. So definitely check it out if you have the opportunity. So once again, coming soon on the 21st, we've got Thanksgiving wines, and the tickets are on sale. I need to get them up on Facebook, make sure that they're up there so that you guys can buy them. In fact, I will do that as soon as I end this live stream. Number two, we've actually got the holiday show scheduled, and that is December 12th, if I recall correctly. And so we got 2 more shows coming up at Reunion Tower before the end of the year. Hope you guys can join us and help celebrate our holidays together. Then we'll have a show later in this month, the free tasting. I know I committed to something, but it's not written on today's notes, so I'm not going to guess at it and make a fool of myself. The less the fewer declarative statements one makes, the less inclined one is to be made a liar. So I will look that back up and loop back around with you. But the online free tasting, the Zoom tasting this month, will be available closer to the end of the month, probably post Black Friday, and we'll see how we can enjoy some wines. We may just, again, do a rehash of the Thanksgiving. We may do the Beaujolais Nouveau reviews. In other words, the stuff that I'm going to do at the Tower, I may pick a couple of those and bring them in so that you can do holiday Thanksgiving specials yourself. So we'll do both the Zoom tasting and the fall special at with the same kind of motif. No reason not to double down so that everybody can enjoy, because you may not be able to come out to the Tower. And finally, I wanted to say, once again, thank you guys for being such loyal and awesome visitors and viewers, for my amazing customer base. You guys are really just so supportive and positive, and really just, I love where we are on our wine journey together, and you guys are helping me, live this dream and do the thing that I love so much. So, and a big thanks out to Matt Gilbert for helping out and driving us all around this weekend. Last week, because he had to sit by and watch us do a bunch of cool stuff, and only got to try little things on little sides. He was very generous with his time, and I want to really appreciate it. So, guys, if you like what we're seeing, come and see us again every week here on the live cast on WineShark Wednesday. Like, subscribe, and share with a wine-loving friend. If you really like what we're doing and would like some interesting access to other cool stuff, including discounted tickets, early access, VIP tour stuff, and all kinds of other interesting things, join us over on Patreon. All the links are down below in the description. So until next time, I have been your Wine Shark. Cheers. And the spotted menace is watching me over the corner here. Look at him. What are you doing, Laszlo? All right, guys. I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. Cheers, y'all.